Welcome, everyone. I'm Katie Richardson, Vice President of Clinician Relations for AngelMD, and I am super excited to be here today with Dr. Joshua Schiffman from Peel Therapeutics. We're going to share with you a Pitch Club extension video for oncology. Dr. Schiffman, go ahead.
Thanks, Katie. It's a real pleasure to be here and tell you today about Peel Therapeutics, our USA-Israeli biotech company that's truly at the intersection of nature and medicine. As you heard, I'm Dr. Joshua Schiffman, and I am a pediatric oncologist by training. So why was Peel Therapeutics created? Well, one of the things that's really fascinating is if you look at modern day lifestyles, they result in diseases. There is a mismatch between our DNA and what people were meant to do and what we end up doing, sitting around, watching TV, checking our phones all of the time. And that has resulted in an explosion really of sedentary lifestyle diseases, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes. The one that I'm most interested in discussing today, though, is cancer, which results in over 10 million deaths per year around the globe. Now, what's so interesting is if you look to nature, if you look to evolution, there are solutions to some of these health problems. For instance, elephants are naturally resistant to cancer. And there are many other examples of the superpowers that we can find in the world of nature. But the problem is modern medicine lacks ways to translate nature's solutions into these medicines. There are issues with solubility, stability, and even intracellular delivery. How do you get nature's solution into the patient? The second problem is once cancer develops, it actually evolves its own self-defense strategies. For instance, the ABCG2 transporter, which we'll talk about more in a moment, is actually one of the most common mechanisms that a cancer cell can spit out chemotherapy and leads basically to resistance. This is a true problem when we think about advanced sarcoma or even GI malignancies, where survival could be 10 to 15% or less. So what's the answer? Well, that's why my co-founder and I began Peel Therapeutics. Dr. Schroeder is actually a chemical engineer at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology focused on drug delivery. And we came together as a physician and a scientist to try to focus on evolution-based medicines. And we started with the natural cancer resistance of elephants and moved on from there. And in fact, now our company has several assets in our pipeline, all focused on cancer and inflammatory diseases, taking from nature and trying to make new medicines for the patients who need them most. Let's talk for a moment about our first candidate, our lead program. And that actually is a drug called Peel 224, which is a camptothecin-based molecule, which comes from something known as the happy tree, which has been used for thousands of years in Eastern traditional medicine. People would chew on the leaves, but then they'd get sick, and sometimes they get better, and sometimes they wouldn't. Here's a little picture of the happy tree in the corner. And what Peel has done, working with colleagues at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, is we've actually taken a modified version of the prodrug, SN38, switched it to SN22, chemical engineered it so that it works even better and has decreased toxicity than other drugs based on camptothecin, and importantly, have used a PEGylated molecule to deliver it even more effectively to the tumors. This topo-1 inhibitor is a DNA repair inhibitor, which basically overwhelms the cancer cell, leading to death of the cancer cell and hopefully survival of the patient. Over the past several years, we've been working closely with Peel 224, and I'll show you some of the clinical data, but this has been engineered to actually overcome chemo resistance. I mentioned the ABCG2 transporter, and the way that that transporter works, it actually grabs onto the hydroxyl group of the chemotherapy, hooks into it, and spits it right out. Well, Peel 224 with SN22 actually does not have that hydroxyl group. There's no hook, and so the chemotherapy goes in, and as one of our colleagues has says, it's like the Roach Motel, it doesn't check out. The chemo goes in and doesn't check out, and you can see this actually in this published finding from our colleagues at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where the accumulation of our drug inside the tumor bed over days and days and days is 25 to 100-fold as much because of the fact that that chemo comes in but doesn't leave. And you'll see in a moment how that translates to actual efficacy. We've been working hard to manufacture and scale up GMP production, and we're advancing very rapidly to a clinical trial, having just recently completed our first pre-IND meeting with the FDA. Here are some examples, Kaplan-Meier curves. You can see of pediatric tumors performed by our colleagues at CHOP, and you can see over 100% survival, or 100% survival, can't do better than over 100% survival of spontaneous neuroblastoma and Ewing sarcoma, very, very deadly tumors, and even about a 60 to 70% survival in rhabdomyosarcoma. And I'll point out, these are long-term, over 6 months of survival in these mice. Well, we wanted to redo this ourselves, and we actually tried it in GI malignancies and found the same type of remarkable response, 100% survival in these very deadly, very aggressive tumors, especially with pancreatic cancer. We were pleased to see when we did continuous dosing, we were able to achieve 100% survival in pancreatic cancer. Moreover, when we looked at these tumors, we were delighted to see that they had shrunk down and actually had over 90% in tumor reduction. Here you can see gastric cancer, and you can see after the last dose, the tumor bed continues to be small with very limited viable tumor. Same thing with colorectal cancer, trying 2 different dose schedules of Peel 224. Even weeks to months after the last dose, we still see this maintenance of over 90% tumor reduction. Absolutely incredible. Of course, I'm biased, I'm an oncologist, so I get excited by these types of things. Now, we also were able to show, importantly, that we see the same impact in tumor reduction in heavily pretreated tumors with irinotecan. So when we took tumors that were irinotecan resistant, previously treated, and then we actually gave those tumors 5 times the amount of irinotecan, they continued to grow. But when we gave those same pre-treated tumors Peel 224, the same type of phenomenon with over 90% tumor reduction. We're very, very excited the implications of this for our patients. Moreover, with such a great amount of accumulation of drug in the tumor, we may be able to dose less and still achieve significant efficacy, but with much, much less systemic toxicity. Something that's very, very important for pediatric oncologists like myself, taking care of young patients. Well, we've worked hard over the past couple of years to really move Peel 224 forward. I mentioned that we've exclusively licensed this from our colleagues at CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We have been moving forward with our pre-IND and IND enabling experiments. We've had our recent IND meeting, and pre-IND meeting, and we plan our formal IND submission by the end of the year, by the end of Q4 2021, with our first phase 1 trial, all-comer solid tumor trial, to begin over next year, followed shortly thereafter by a phase 2 expansion trial. So Peel 224 is moving straight to the clinic, and it's going quickly. But we also have other drugs based on nature in our pipeline. One of them includes this neutrophil targeting peptide, which is actually a natural NET inhibitor found in newborn babies. What's a NET? Well, a NET actually is a neutrophil extracellular trap. When our neutrophils, part of our innate immune response, encounter a pathogen, they spit out their DNA. That DNA forms webs. That web can catch the bacteria or virus. But too many NETs actually lead to many different acute diseases, strokes, heart attack, multi-organ failure and sepsis, chronic disease like rheumatoid arthritis, or even idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. We're taking this nature's own anti-inflammatory medicine, Mother Nature's dimmer switch on inflammation, and we are turning this into a medicine to help patients. And of course, we haven't forgotten the elephants. That's where we got our start. We are working very closely to take this natural cancer-fighting protein in elephants, elephant P53, put it into a liposomal nanoparticle, and deliver it to treat and maybe even one day prevent cancer. I will mention that one of the colleagues we're working with with these LNPs is at Nanovation, who actually discovered and invented the technology used in COVID-19 vaccines, the lipid nanoparticle delivery system. So we feel we are in good company. Of course, as a biotech, we have all of our IP secured, methods and method and composition claims. Some of these have already been granted, others are now undergoing nationalization. But most importantly, how are we funding Peel Therapeutics? Well, we began with a convertible note several years ago. We raised close to $9.2 million. That money actually enabled us to continue and to do all of the work I talked about today. We also received non-dilute funding, SBIR and foundation grants. We now have a current convertible note round that is open. We were oversubscribed at 10 million and expanded to 15 million, and there is still room available today before we close this round. We are anticipating a Series A round in the next 12 to 18 months of perhaps $30 to $60 million that will fund the remainder of the phase 1, phase 2 clinical trial as we move forward and contemplate a Series B or perhaps even an IPO at that point as the other assets in our company move along. So in summary, Peel Therapeutics is truly at the intersection of nature and technology. We look to see how has evolution solved some of the biggest problems for health and disease, and we use modern technology to make medicines that will benefit the patients who need them the most. Thank you.
Wow, Josh, all I can say is wow. I'm blown away here. This is very exciting. And I love your point about these therapeutics being kind of at the intersection of nature and technology. Talk more about how some of these novel therapies were identified.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start with the elephant P53. So the way that we actually discovered this is I mentioned I'm a pediatric oncologist. When I was 15, Katie, I actually had cancer myself. So I said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a cancer doctor and take care of kids like cancer, just like the doctors took care of me. A little pay it forward. And so as I did my training, I also became fascinated with the lab and what we can do to actually help patients by making scientific discoveries. Well, we were very focused on who's getting more cancer and why, what types of animals are naturally predisposed to cancer, like pet dogs, for instance, and family hereditary cancer, which is my clinical area of expertise. And then we learned that there are some animals out there, like elephants, that almost never get cancer. Well, how did they do it? It was like a light bulb went on, right? We switched from focus who's getting more cancer to who's almost never getting cancer. And I was actually giving a talk in Israel where I met Dr. Schroeder, my co-founder, and I ended my talk at the time, Katie, by saying, gosh, if only there was a way to take from an elephant and give to our human patients who need this the most. And Dr. Schroeder and I started talking after the break, and he explained that he works with nanotechnology and he could do just that. And so that's really how Peel started. Peel is actually the Hebrew word for elephant. So we're elephant therapeutics. The other drugs came along by colleagues who actually had made similar interesting discoveries about inflammation or cancer in their own laboratories and realized what we were doing with elephants and that we had a pipeline. We had an approach that was working. And so they came to us and we very quickly worked out deals to exclusively license their drugs and take what they had discovered in nature at the bench, get it through the valley of death, and make these amazing medicines with so much potential to help the patients who need it the most.
Well, that is very exciting and very cool. I gotta say, I'm impressed. This is very cool. You mentioned, and here on your timeline, you're getting ready to start those clinical trials for Peel 224. That's super exciting, first of all, and your preclinical data that you showed, again, I'm blown away. But tell me more about how those trials are going to be structured and what that's going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So this will be your standard phase 1 trial, all comer, solid tumors. And we basically are looking to do safety profile and the maximum tolerated dose in humans, if you will, to find what is a good starting dose for our drug when we move to the expansion cohort. Now, the expansion cohort, I'm really pleased to say, is going to have 6 different arms, the way it's currently being planned. And one of the branches will be for sarcoma. because sarcoma is really an undertreated disease. And in fact, if you go after some of these diseases, not only do you get orphan disease status, but if you have actually good enough results, you can contemplate accelerated approval and really move this drug forward where it needs to go as quickly as possible. And for the sarcoma arm, Katie, it would be Ewing sarcoma and rhabdomyosarcoma. I'm especially excited that the FDA has said that we can enroll from 12 years and up. So that adolescent and young adult category, again, is so important for me as a pediatric oncologist to include those patients in the study. But there are also adults who get those diseases and need help as well. And then also leiomyosarcoma. So Ewing's, rhabdo, leiomyosarcoma. Then for the GI cancers, gastric cancer, colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer. And we've selected those because irinotecan is part of the normal standard of care therapy that they receive already. And we've seen such remarkable results as I shared in the preclinical data.
Very cool. And as a pediatrician, I'm with you. Like, how exciting that they approved 12 and up to be in your trials.
Yes.
Super exciting.
Progress.
Yes, very cool. Well, let me ask you one more question. I want to know how our AngelMD network can support your efforts.
That's a great question, Katie. Well, you know, of course, we want people to invest if they're interested, right? I should have this bar up, and there is room, although it's going quickly, but certainly we'd welcome any conversations now or even perhaps for Series A. But also, equally importantly, we are, I mentioned, a growing biotech company. We certainly are interested and looking for people who perhaps could serve the role as our chief medical officer. Certainly looking for people with experience in clinical operations and running clinical trials. And of course, also, obviously, clinical advisors. We want to engage the experts. We know that oncology especially is a field where there's many subspecialists and there are many nuances of each of the different types of cancers, even those that we're including in our clinical trials. So we're always willing and looking to speak to people who can help Peel to achieve its goal truly of making evolutionary inspired medicines for patients.
Well, that's fantastic. I don't have any of that expertise, but I'd raise my hand right away. Very, very cool stuff. I'm going to have you put up your contact information one more time. Yep. And I just want to thank you again for being here. I know our folks, this innovation in oncology, to your point, there's a lot going on, a lot of exciting stuff, and your data so far is phenomenal. So I wish you all the best of luck and look forward to hearing more as your trials move forward, et cetera. So thank you again, Josh, for being here with me today.
Katie, it was a real pleasure. And like I said, it was a few years ago, it was like a light bulb went off and we looked around and we said, you know what? Nature has already solved these problems for us. We've just got to be smart enough to look and listen, use a little technology, and let's save the world and let's do it together. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.